Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington, and I am joined today by Jamie Buckley of Jamie Buckley Photography, who has been so kind to come in on this long holiday weekend. I know people, and it's stressful with the holidays and scheduling and families and things. So I really appreciate you making the time to come in. It means a lot. When wedding vendors take time out of their schedule when they could be doing more fun things to keep doing work. So thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company?
Hey, I am Jamie Buckley of Jamie Buckley Photography. I shoot primarily weddings, a little bit of family, and also a little bit of, let's call it intimate male portraits.
Is that like the boudoir?
I hate the word boudoir because people just associate it with like a kind of comical sense. I guess male boudoir, because, well, I guess I could use the word boudoir because it's not gendered, so we don't need to gender it. I have been shooting weddings this will be my 5th year. I've been in the Seattle market for 3.5. And yeah, I really enjoy it, weirdly.
And so if people are recognizing a little bit of an accent, not native to Seattle, talk about a little bit about your background and where you come from.
So I was born in Glasgow, Scotland, lived there for 23 years. And then I weirdly moved to Vancouver, BC, not Washington, for just over a year. Then I moved back to Scotland. And then in 2015, I finally moved to Seattle. And that's where I've lived now for 3.5 years.
And what do you think about the Seattle, living here in Seattle?
It's similar but different to home. It's similar climate, similar surroundings. There's a lot of green, a lot of snowy mountains, but it's bigger, much bigger. Like the population of Scotland is 5 million, and I believe the population of King County is 3 million or something like that. So yeah, it's much bigger. People don't appreciate how small Scotland is.
That's funny. We when my brother graduated from college, we did a tour around Scotland and it is. I remember it being a very similar climate because I think we left here and just packed rain jackets and stuff, and it was a very similar weather and climate and things like that. So what brought you back to Seattle and to the States, at least full time, for the last 3.5 years?
So I was that weird kid who always grew up kind of romanticizing about America. I don't know why. I always was weirdly obsessed with America. And then just by a weird coincidence, not because I forced it, my husband who I met was American, and it took us nine years for me to get here, thanks to the joys of immigration.
Really?
Yeah, it was a struggle, but got here in the end. So
he was here, and you guys were kind of long.
Yeah. So we did the long distance thing for 3 years until 2009, when I tried to come out to visit for the summer and was denied entry. Just because they thought I was going to stay. I wasn't. I had a return flight booked and everything, same as every other time I came, but they were like, no, thank you, bye-bye. So then I wasn't able to come in under the Visa Waiver Act anymore. So our plan then was to move to Scotland, which I wasn't really all for. But then the US housing market crashed, and basically my husband would have lost money selling his house. And it was already going to be really expensive to move. So we just kind of played it by ear, took like vacations, places together. And then in 2011 is when I moved to Vancouver. He was able to come up and visit me every weekend. And then in 2013, the Defense of Marriage Act. Yeah, the Defense of Marriage Act was struck down, which allowed him to sponsor me for a green card. But of course, when it was struck down, everyone applied. So it took 18 months to get it. And then I was finally able to move here.
That's awesome. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a process, but it makes us appreciate each other more, I think.
Right?
Because of all the time we spent apart, but also just all the struggles that we had to go through to make it work. Now we're like, wow, we're stuck together.
Yeah, right. We could never go back on that ever. And we were talking just a little bit before you sat down. You guys met, which I think is an awesome story. If you want to give a little background on how you met your husband.
So we actually met playing video games. There was a website. It no longer exists, but it was like a forum called gamer.org, Gaymer. And there was a group of us playing Halo 2. And I didn't know everyone that I was playing with. I knew a few. I didn't know my husband. And the game split us into, I think it was 8 teams of 2. And I was put on his team, and I didn't know him. So I muted my mic because, I was a delightful person. So I didn't want to talk to him. And I put on some music, and I was just happily sitting there singing along to myself with a beautiful rendition of Don't Ya by the Pussycat Dolls. And that when you're listening to music and no one's around and, you're going pretty right into it, and this little voice in my ear said, "You know that I can hear you, right?" And instantly I was like, "No, thank you," and just turned off my Xbox. And then the next day he sent me a message being, apologetic and saying that he didn't mean to embarrass me. And I was like, no, it was me. And then we just got to chatting, and a year later I flew out to Seattle for 2 weeks to see whether this thing could work in person as well as online. And turns out it did. So 13 years later, here we are still.
I think that's incredible. I absolutely love that. I think that's so great. And so he's from here.
He's originally from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia.
Okay.
But yeah, he's lived here for 20-some years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so now you work here in Seattle now doing wedding photography. How did you always know that you wanted to be a photographer? Were you always creative kind of growing up? How did that?
So I was always I'm the youngest of 3. So I was always kind of called the creative one. I'm left-handed, so that was probably forced on me by my parents. But I was always the creative one, but I didn't really have a creative outlet. Like, I tried my hand at art, can't draw for nothing. Tried my hand at painting. I even did a bit of a stint in music. I played the trumpet, got bored of that. And then in 2007, when I was here for the summer, I had some birthday money, and my husband said, why don't you buy a camera? And I was like, why would I buy a camera? This is a weird suggestion. But I did, because he got to spend that birthday money. So I bought one. It was, I guess they call them bridge cameras now. It wasn't a DSLR. And I just went out and started taking pictures of things. We went on a lot of trips that summer. So I was just doing a lot of landscape stuff. And then I guess it was 2012, I think. I splurged and bought a 300-pound camera. And that was a lot for me at the time. And I got the Canon 85 1.8. And then, that's not a landscape lens. So I started taking pictures of family members. And then they were all very, why don't you take pictures of, other people? Why don't you charge people? And I was, nope, don't want to do that. And then I decided, I gotta recoup the cost of this lens somehow. So I did a bunch of I think it was 25-pound family photo shoots, just posted in one of those local buy-sell groups. And people I got 50 or 60 messages about this. So I did, I think 5 or 6.
And this was back in Scotland.
Yeah. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. So when I moved here, I was like, I should, just try and make something of this. And I knew that, or I didn't know it. People had told me the only way to make money in photography was weddings. But I was like, no, I don't really want to. I'd shot my sister's wedding in 2014, which I had no right to do. I had a Canon 50D, I think. I had one body, no backup. I had a nifty 50, and I think it was a 17 to 50. So not great lenses, but she said she wanted me to do it, so I did it, and I enjoyed it. Looking back on it now, I cringe, but at the time I enjoyed it, and it was probably good for me. So I did a couple weddings in 2015. Two that I liked, one that I did not, and that one kind of put me off it. So I was like, nope, just gonna stick to the family stuff. And then in 2016, my dad asked me to shoot his wedding, and I was already going, so I was like, fine. So I did that, and I really enjoyed that. And then my coworker at the coffee shop, she asked me if I would fly out to Chicago and shoot her wedding, which I really enjoyed. So I was like, hey, let's give this a second chance. Let's be a bit more selective in the clientele that we pick. And since then, I've never shot a wedding that I didn't enjoy. So yeah, I got bit by the bug, and I really like it now.
That's why, yeah. When I was getting started, it was the same thing, and we just had we were never going to do weddings. And I remember I was doing some stuff with Seattle Magazine, and they wanted to give us some advertising in Seattle Bride, and I said, "Oh no, I have no interest in that. We'll never be doing weddings." And then it just you've come to find your way there if it's meant to be one way or another. So now you do weddings, and then you also barista still. Talk about that and kind of that outlet to work.
So I've worked in coffee since 2008. It was kind of my first real job, and I'm that weird person that actually really enjoys it. Like people who work in customer service fall into two categories: either they love it or they hate it. And I actually really enjoy it. Like, I think the two kind of feed into each other really well, because I spend all day at the coffee shop making small talk with people, and then I go to weddings and I have to talk to people there all the time. At the coffee shop, it's people I see kind of every day, whereas at the weddings, it's people I'll see once in my lifetime. But I'm able to have meaningful conversations with them because of what I do all day. And it's like, I'm an introvert, so it's very good that I get to kind of fill my social quota by just talking to random people all day. And I love coffee. I actually enjoy making the coffee. It's weird that it's actually a huge part of some people's day. Like, if you make them a bad coffee in the morning, you ruin their day. But if you make them a good coffee, you make their day. And then sometimes people come back and they're like, that coffee you made me this morning was amazing. And I'm like, cool. That's awesome. But yeah, I've worked in 5 coffee shops in 10 years, which is probably a bit weird because I guess I stick around at places.
Yeah, right. You feel like maybe it's a little more like come and go, or you kind of.
Yeah, like I've worked with so many people, whereas I seem to just stick around. And I've met some of like my closest friends through these jobs, like people I still know from back home through just the coffee shop. So yeah, I am probably going to be kind of giving it up probably this year or next as I move towards shooting full-time photography. But since weddings are kind of a seasonal gig, I would probably still go back and work like part-time in the winters, because I'm guessing I would probably miss it. Plus free coffee is, it really cheapens your life.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's something that you enjoy doing, it's Leslie was just on the podcast, and, she keeps her job because it's like if you're forced to do photography like all the time, and then maybe you would like kind of learn to grow to hate it or grow to kind of resent it. Like if you're forced to do it all the time. I don't know. Do you ever worry about that or?
I don't know about that. So when I moved here, I was just going straight into being full-time photography, which looking back was a terrible decision because I had I didn't know anyone when I moved here apart from my husband and his friends. So after I think 3 months, I was bouncing off the walls. Like I had a few photo shoots, but I didn't really have a lot of money to advertise. I didn't know anyone, so I had no network to kind of mine. And, my husband would come home from work and I'd have just been sitting in the house all day, and he'd come home, and that way when you come home from work, you just want to chill out. And then there would be me. It was like, hi, what did you do today? How are you? And he was like, you need to get a job. So I actually got a job at a local coffee shop, a little family run place. And then through that, I actually met a couple clients, which then when I moved jobs again, I met more clients. So I don't think I could ever grow to hate it, but at the same time, I don't think I would want to do it just solely by itself, because I do get a lot of my like socialness from talking to people all day. So I think that if I was just at home kind of editing by myself through the week and then shooting on the weekends, I think I would probably go a little stir crazy. But then this past summer was like working full time Monday to Friday at the coffee shop and then shooting weddings on the weekend was a lot. So I think I probably need to work out a better balance. But yeah, I want to keep both in my life, just because they are kind of my two passions. But I definitely need to find a better balance.
Luckily, my wife Dorothy talks to 29 students every day, so she's very done talking at the end of the day, and so that I get to do my talking, because I think Rosie, our dog, is done hearing me talk by the end of the day. What did you find kind of growing into the Seattle wedding community here? Kind of like, entering here, like you said, you know a lot of people. Like now, like do you feel like you're kind of like in that? Obviously in the network in the area here. What did you find kind of coming into the Seattle community like that?
So just before I moved here, I can't remember how I found it, but I joined this Facebook group called North Sound Portrait Photographers. I think there's about 1,000 people in there, but like a lot of the people in there who like I back and forth with, like I've not met them in person, but I feel like I know them. So like that was a huge help when I moved here. Like I felt like I could just post something there to ask people, like, because I didn't know any locations, stuff like that. So, I posted that and they would, give up their locations, which I think some places are not like that. They're very kind of my location. Whereas I think it's in the bio of that group, community over competition. And that's kind of what I found for a lot of this area, is that people are very community over competition. Like there's a lot of camaraderie. A lot of the people who I have second shot with or had second shoot for me, they're just lovely people. There's no kind of cutthroatness to it, I don't think. So yeah, I feel like I just kind of came into this really nice familial area, which was really nice.
Yeah, I noticed a lot online about that. A lot of like, swapping mini sessions, or like you said, like sharing locations, or hey, where was this? Or does someone have somewhere that's covered in this area because it's going to be rainy in there? So it's nice to see, because like I said, I don't have any context for like any other like large wedding communities, but I've heard that they say Seattle is like a little more friendly in that regard, which I think is good. Did you kind of, when you were getting your business started, when you originally, like they were saying you should charge to do like sessions, you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. Like, have you found it a struggle kind of like doing the business side of like the wedding photography, or is that something you've grown to enjoy? Or
I enjoy it to a point. Like I'm kind of weird in that I like making kind of like I like making my adverts. Is that like I like writing up the text,
like your copy and stuff. Yeah.
Like I've had a few people say that like I write really well, and so I enjoy doing that. I kind of cringe at some of the things that I write, but I enjoy doing it. The taxes and stuff, I just leave to my husband. He's in finance, so I'm just like, here you go, take it all. Which is probably not the best way to do it, but it's his domain, should we say? But then I also kind of struggle with charging what I'm worth. That's kind of a main struggle. I find that kind of tough. Looking at going full time next year as well is kind of it's going to be an interesting year.
Yeah, it's tough to kind of make that leap. So it's something that everyone kind of has to struggle with and kind of go. I will say, looking through your site, it is a very like personable, and like I think like you said, finding the right clients that like, are attracted to you or that you are attracted to work with, I think is important. Like talk about like your ideal client and kind of like your style. Like, I was looking through your site, like I can, see a little more offbeat, a little more, intimate. Talk about kind of, keywords and things that you look for in kind of your style. And
so in the beginning, I definitely didn't know my style. Or I guess I didn't trust my style. Like in the beginning, I was very what's the word? Reticent, I think is the word, to put too much of myself into my style, I guess. Like I didn't mention anywhere on my site that I was gay. I didn't mention that I had a husband. I didn't really show off that I had any tattoos. But then through the clients that I got that way, I was like, these aren't the people that I want. Like, these are nice people, but they're not the ones that I like wake up and jump out of bed excited to go shoot the wedding for. So then I did a 180. I redid all my branding. I mentioned, my history in my bio, mentioned my husband. And then through that, I was able to find the people who were more kind of my tribe. So not specifically LGBT, but very kind of angled towards that, or LGBT friendly. Like those people I find are more into me. Sounds a bit weird. But yeah, like people who, who beat to the sound of their own drum. Like I'm there for the, bride or groom that has tattoos everywhere. Pink hair, blue hair. Like the ones who tell corny jokes, because I'm all about the dad jokes. But yeah, just people who are true to themselves, even if society's maybe not their biggest fan, is kind of what my vibe is.
No, I think that's good. I think it's important for a lot of people to kind of like get to that point as business owners, because I think like when you're starting out, it is like I'll shoot anything, anywhere of any kind, and any style, and we have any budget that'll fit anything, and like anything you want, like I'll do it. And then, and it's not, because I think like originally maybe I thought like, oh, like some of these people that are like really stubborn about like their clients and things, like, oh, they're cocky or too confident, or like I thought, well, that's like, wouldn't you want to like work with anybody? But like now, like years and years later, it is like it's more like it's in the best benefit for not only you but like the client too, right? Like you want them to be happy. Like you don't want like you to show up with a tattoo and have them be like, oh my god, or like like a photographer with like blue hair or whatever, and be like, oh my god, like I mean, you want everybody to be comfortable, right?
So at my consults for weddings, the two things I always do is I always roll up my sleeves because I have a lot of tattoos on my forearms. And then I always in some way mention that I have a husband, because the two things that I want them to always know is that I have tattoos, which is not a huge deal for some people, but I guess there's some churches that don't allow it. So I just want always people to know. And then I always want them to know that I'm gay, because if they like, I'm not here to judge them if they have an issue with that, but I also don't want to work with them because they're going to be uncomfortable with that. And you can't take good photos if you're uncomfortable.
Do you find talk about kind of your process in terms of like getting clients and working towards that wedding day and kind of working with them. Like, do you like, obviously, like how far out, like ideally do you like to meet clients, and then talk about kind of that process of getting people like comfortable with like engagement session and shooting style and things kind of moving towards the wedding?
So I always meet people in person before I book them. I think I've done one where I did like a Skype session, and it was because they were kind of further out location wise. But I always like to meet people in person because, people can say whatever they want in an email, but your body language and just talking to someone, it's harder to lie, and you can get a much better read on someone. So I always do that, meet them for coffee or whatever, just chat. They tell me their story, I never like push on people to, book now. I'm always like, go away and talk about it. Email me. And then afterwards, I do follow up with like hey, did I answer all your questions? If not, please, reach out right now. And I've had a couple of people who were like, oh, we forgot to say this, or forgot to ask this, or, we didn't feel comfortable asking this. And so, that's a good way to get them to be able to ask everything they want. Because a lot of people don't like to talk money or deposits or, stuff like that in person, which is fine. But then all of my wedding packages come with an engagement shoot because it's such a great way to get to know your couple. I usually spend probably around 2 hours shooting their engagement session. They're included for free. Like it's basically me just using that time to get to know them, get to see how they interact, getting them comfortable in front of the camera. I shot, I think, one of my weddings last year where we weren't able to sync up on an engagement shoot before the wedding. And it was basically, they were much stiffer. I didn't know as many kind of cues for them. So it's just a really good way to get to know people. And then usually about a month before their wedding, we'll meet up again, just go over their timeline. I try not to be the person that creates their timeline because I like to, leave that to their day of coordinator. But, if I look at it and I'm like, oh, this is a bit weird, then I'll say something. But yeah, usually I'm just kind of arranging the times for when we can do good photos and then head to their wedding and shoot the happiest day of their life.
Yeah, so you said you've kind of grown into being a wedding photographer. What is it specifically about weddings and couples and things? Is it just kind of like the moments in the day? Like, talk about your favorite parts of a wedding and kind of what resonates with you.
So I don't understand why more people don't like. I see people who are like, I'll never shoot a wedding, and I'm like, why not? You literally get to spend the entire summer or the entire year being with people on the happiest day of their life week after week. I don't understand why people don't enjoy it. Like, I know a lot of people say that weddings are stressful, but I'm like, that's you. That's not the wedding. Like, it's how you approach it. Like, I'm a very laid back person. So if things start, going off the rails on a wedding day, I'm just like, hey, you're here. Your partner's here. The officiant's here. That's all you need. Like, at the end of the day, you don't need anything else to get married. So I'm pretty good at kind of mellowing people out if things start getting a bit amped up. But yeah, it's such a fun day. Like, usually the bride and groom don't care, especially if they have like a planner or a day of coordinator or whatever. They don't care about any of that. They don't know that they're running an hour behind schedule. They're just having fun. And that's the best part. Is that these people are just so happy. It's infectious. But my favorite part of the wedding day is probably, and I try to push this on people, is the first look, because there's just something amazing about first looks. I guess it's because it's a private moment. That's why I always try and push it, is that it's this private moment between, two partners who are about to get married, and they haven't seen each other probably in at least 12 hours, and they get to see each other like done up in their best attire, and a lot of times people will cry. I'm just like, this is so pure and happy. And I find that weddings that don't have a first look, I don't like the first time that the bride or groom sees their partner, I don't think it's especially with guys, I think because they're standing up in front of all those people, I think they reserve themselves, and they don't have the same emotional outburst as they would in a private setting, which is why I try and push it, because I love taking photos of people crying.
No, it's tough because and as video, I don't get to really do like the engagement sessions and stuff as much. And I always, I always try to match like the photographer with time, at least wedding day, so that we can be there, all the time and kind of get all that. Because, it is important for me to like have that time with the couples. And the weddings where we don't have a first look. And obviously, it's like a personal choice, and I'm not going to force somebody to do it. But my assistant will be with the guy, all day until, ceremony, whatever. I'll be with the bride. So maybe we'll do portraits or whatever afterward, and like, I'll get a little bit of time with them, and like whatever, but like I won't feel like I know, the groom or the other partner or whatever, like nearly as much. It's like if we do a first look and they get to hang out for the afternoon, you know what I mean? Where like you want like that time to like get to know what kind of makes them click. And I don't know, I feel like when we don't do that first look, then I'll be like, oh yeah, like he's great. Like, but like I got to spend an hour with them and now they're at the reception. And like, I don't know. I just feel like you kind of lose that. Or like the ones where you're with them as much of the day as possible together. I don't know. I think
it's the reason I kind of try and push people towards doing the first look is that, one, it's really adorable, but you also can do a lot of the wedding part, like the group wedding party photos, the family photos, stuff like that before the ceremony, so that after the ceremony, they can just spend time with their like family and friends. Whereas if they haven't done that first look beforehand, then afterwards they need to do the family photos, the wedding party photos, the couple photos. And then like an hour and a half has gone by and all of their guests are like, are we ever going to get to see you guys? They're then trying to eat dinner and people are like, hey, they're like, hello. Like, I feel like days with first looks flow better. But mainly I just like taking pictures of people crying.
That's awesome. So when you're not shooting weddings, I know you spend, I read through your site, a lot of different, interests and things that you have. And I think that's good. A lot of similar TV shows and things we have in common. Talk about some things you do when you're not shooting weddings and things like interests and other like hobbies you have.
So when I was shooting weddings, ironically, one of the things I like to do is shoot these intimate male portrait sessions. This was something I kind of started to do to avoid burning out during wedding season this year. I was just shooting wedding after wedding after wedding, and I was enjoying it, but I was also kind of beginning to feel like they were molding into one. So I was like, I need to shoot something just for me. So I was actually inspired by another photographer who lives in Atlanta called Kevin Lowry. He had a project. Instagram shut it down. It was called Skin Like Dawn, and it was just photos of men being vulnerable. And so I started a project called No Bits But Butts. And I've just been shooting men or male couples, just like in-home, kind of boudoir stuff. And it's just been like really fun because it's fun to shoot, but it's also kind of a technical thing. Like I'm shooting in spaces that are tiny. I'm shooting in spaces that have no light. So it's been fun because I can then take it back to the weddings for doing stuff there. I've been exploring a lot with lighting, things like that. So it's a hobby not related to wedding photography, but kind of as well. But outside of that, I read a lot. Like a lot. I still play video games when I get the chance. I have a dog, so I have to walk him every now and then. I actually, through him, I work with the rescue that we got him with. So I do a lot of work with them. I go to events to photograph them. I photograph new dogs. We foster through them. So
yeah, talk about that. How does that work?
So basically they are, it's Forgotten Dogs Rescue. They are a foster-based rescue. They don't have a shelter or space or anything like that. So they are primarily pulling pit bulls. Usually it used to be from Yakima because Yakima had a breed ban that just got overturned. So I don't know how that's going to change things going forward. But they would pull pit bulls from the Yakima shelters, bring them over to here, put them into foster houses that they've got around the Seattle area, and then get them adopted. So we've done 2 fosters through them. The first one was great. She was basically used as a puppy mill, and then she was picked up when she was pregnant. She gave birth to 8 puppies, I think. Only 2 of them made it. But she was basically, they fixed her. Not that she was broken, they fixed her scientific, I don't know. And then we fostered her and kind of got her. She was a very timid dog when she came to us. Like, she'd only known mistreatment, and our dog is not the subtlest dog, but that was actually great because it brought her out of her shell. And then she actually got adopted, I think 2 months after she'd been with us. So that's great. I still follow her on Instagram. I get to see her. It's great. And then the second one we had was not as great. It was a 5-month-old puppy that we passed on to another foster because we didn't have the time for her. But we're going to be keeping on doing it because, you know, this rescue can only save as many dogs as they have fosters for. So, like, we want to get a second dog for our dog, but I want to keep fostering because I want to pay it back to them for giving us our dog in the first place.
And then you said you guys also like help with events and stuff, photograph, right?
Yeah, so I go to they do events twice a month at like pet stores. They take some of the dogs that are available for adoption and just, you know, hang out at the pet store. And yeah, I go along and take photos of the dogs just like hanging out, people playing with them and stuff like that. And then sometimes when they get new dogs, if they don't have good photos of them, I'll go along and take some photos of the dog, like, you know, playing in the yard or whatever. But that was actually, before we got our dog, that was why I'd contacted them. There was a guy on the East Coast who went up and down shelters and took the dogs out of the shelters into like parks and stuff, took photos of them, and the adoption rate for the dogs went up by something like 60%. So yeah, I just, you know, give them good photos of the dogs and hopefully it can get them adopted.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I know, like you said, you're a big reader, huge Harry Potter fan.
Yes.
I saw it. Talk about that. Talk about kind of not only reading, but Harry Potter and your love for that.
So like the first Harry Potter book came out in 97, so I would have been 9 when that came out. So that was just kind of my childhood. I actually didn't read the first 2. It was the third one that I got into first. My dad bought me it for Christmas. I was like, who's this nerd? And I read it and I was like, what? So I read them in a really weird order. I went like 3, 4, 2, 1, 5, 6, 7. And it was just a huge part of my childhood, kind of growing up. And then my nephew, my sister's kid, his name is Harry. So I actually got a Harry Potter tattoo for him. She says he's not named after Harry Potter, but we all know she's lying. But yeah, there's just something, I don't know, pure about the books. Like, I just read a thing the other day about how Ron is like this character that's always laughed about, but, you know, he gave Harry half of his sandwich on the train when that was all he had. And so, like, there's a lot of depth to the books that I think a lot of people don't realize. They just kind of look at people and like, oh, you're like a kid's book. And I'm like, whatever, this series of books have a lot of life lessons in them. But yeah, we're actually next month going to London for a vacation, and we're going to the studio tour, which is just outside London, and it's like the original sets that you can go and visit and walk around and stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that.
You haven't done that before?
No. We've been to the park over in Florida. That's pretty cool. At the Universal Studios. Those are really cool. But yeah, I've never been to the studio tour. And then we're also going to see The Cursed Child at the West End, the play. So that should be pretty exciting.
Do you still make it back home at all, or?
Yeah, I've been home every year. Yeah, I've been home every year since I moved here. This trip will probably be my last for a while, because I'm finding that because I'm going over there so much, people aren't coming here to visit me, because I go there and I can see like everyone at once, whereas if they come here, they can only see me. And that's fine, you know, it's 10 hours on a flight. It's not cheap, but at the same time, I want people to come visit me to see the life that I've built here. So I'm gonna not visit for a few years and see what happens. I also want to do, like, my husband only gets 2 weeks vacation or 3 weeks vacation at his work, going back to the UK, you've got to take like at least a week. So it's eating into a lot of our vacation time. So I want to go travel other places. But also I want people to come visit me.
And then talk about, I want to talk about this, a little bit more about this male boudoir project you're working on, and more just kind of like that trend right now. And like, I think we had talked about like right at the beginning of the podcast about like this boudoir term, and like, you don't really like that, but like talk about kind of like your thought process behind that, and kind of like how that is becoming like a thing nowadays that people, you know, are doing for their wives or partners or whoever, kind of extend on that a little bit.
So yeah, like the reason I don't like the word boudoir is that it has a lot of kind of not negative connotations, but a lot of people do it as like a joke version of female boudoir, but with a guy. So they'll do like, you know, a larger guy doing like female boudoir maternity or something like that. And I'm like, okay. But I think it's, especially with guys, I think men are kind of taught from a young age that they shouldn't think about themselves as beautiful or handsome. I think guys who kind of, you know, I mean, there's in society, there's the joke, like the caricature of the guy who's like, you know, primping his hair in the mirror, and people laugh at that. And I'm like, okay, why is it okay for a woman to do her hair for an hour, but if a guy does it for 5 minutes, we all laugh at him? Like, why can't men take in their own appearance without seeming vain, whereas with women, it's okay. So for that, I like showing the guys like the photos during the session, and they're like, "Oh wow, look at that!" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're a handsome guy. Why don't you know that?" And then it's also just about like feeling comfortable in your own skin. Like, I usually ask people in advance, like, what don't you like about your body? And then, you know, they'll be like, I don't like my eyebrows. I don't like my nose. I'm too fat. I'm too thin. And then I don't try to enhance that, but I do try to like take photos where that's kind of the focus. And then they look at it and they're like, oh, that actually looks really good. And I'm like, yeah. So I did that because, you know, because of the light, it was falling on your face, and see how your nose looks fine, whereas you told me that you didn't like your nose. And I'm like, see? And then they're like, oh yeah. But then also for partners, it's a fun way to just kind of reconnect with each other. One of the things that I've kind of weirdly fallen into is doing sessions with older guys. Like I did a session with these two old guys who, I think they were in their late 60s, and they've been together for 33 years. I'm only 30 years old. They've been together as a couple for longer than I've been alive, which doesn't sound, you know, you hear about couples married for 40, 50 years, but they're a gay couple who've been together for 33 years, which in itself is, you know, kind of amazing because, you know, there's that stereotype that gay couples don't make it. But also so 30 years ago was the late 80s. It was a very different time. Like, they couldn't, you know, get married. There was the AIDS crisis. And we just talked about that. And I feel like it was kind of cathartic for them. Like, they actually were like crying as they were telling me about friends that they'd lost to AIDS. They were telling me about how in 2015, when the law got overturned and gay marriage became legal across the country, they remember exactly where they were when they heard it. And it was just amazing. And then I posted them in a photography group. It has like 50,000 members or something. And I posted them and I was like, no one's gonna like these, but I'm really proud of them. Like, the lighting was amazing. And I posted them and people went crazy over them. I was like, this is like some weird bizarro world where I've just posted a picture of two, like, first of all, two men, but also two older men who society would tell us aren't worth that much anymore. And yet these people are like losing it over them. Like, I got so many messages. I got so many friend requests. Like to this day, people still like message me and they're like, I just saw that photo. It's amazing. Like I love the story. Thank you for sharing it. And so I kind of gravitated more towards doing the shoots with the older guys because it kind of ties into the other project that I was doing. And like I just like to talk to them and hear their stories and like how they persevered. Like they endured so much so that I can now have what I have. And you know, if this is a way that I can kind of pay it back to them, then you know, I'm happy to do that.
I think that's awesome. And I think that, yeah, just like, even just kind of the wisdom there and like you said, with the age and even like with, you know, same sex or bride and groom or whoever, like, weddings, like with couples like that are older, whether it's like my, you know, our age or because we're pretty similar age or, you know, older, I do find a little bit more wisdom there than like some of these like 19-year-olds, which it's still, you know, it's great and it's a wedding, but like you do find like people that have spent kind of like part of their lives actually together already before they got married, or, you know, if they're like this couple that's, you know, been together, I do think you get a little bit, you know, a lot more from kind of like seeing that, and they just have a lot more experiences, and I think it's a little more fulfilling to kind of see that. I also have to imagine that like kind of going through that with them and like other guys and things like maybe feeling uncomfortable or like having to open up to you, like that's got to help then translate to like weddings and other things, right? Kind of like that tact that you're obviously that you have to get these guys to do that, right? Kind of makes you like a kind of like a whisperer in terms of like, you know, but like getting people to be more comfortable, right? Do you feel like that's like applicable to a lot of things now?
I think so. I sometimes when I post like a picture on Instagram, people will be like, you know, I love the emotion that you got here. Like, it's so weird that they're so comfortable. And I don't really approach it as so much as like making them comfortable. I think it's just, I naturally make people comfortable just because I don't have like any airs and graces. I just like talk to them as human beings. Like I'll joke with them, you know, admonish them mockingly kind of thing. But yeah, I just kind of be myself. And I think I kind of naturally, because I am so laid back, I don't, like I get nervous during, you know, wedding days and stuff like that, but I don't project that. That's all internalized. So yeah, I think, you know, I think definitely with the more kind of intimate posing, I bring a lot of that over. And especially during things like the first look and the couples portraits, I think that's very helpful. And sometimes people kind of side eye me and they're like, I'm sorry, what do you want us to do? I'll be like, touch each other, like touch your bodies in as many places as possible. And they're like, what? So yeah, I think the two are definitely helping each other, which is nice.
Yeah, it's tough because like on a wedding day, like there's so many other things besides like taking the time to like make everybody feel comfortable and like get good photos. Like there's a lot of other stuff. So I would have to imagine that like having these like sessions and being able to like really like get to know people and like figure out like what makes them comfortable, and like it would be nice to have, because like a lot of the time at weddings, like whether you're laid back or not, there is like still a timeline and you're like, oh crap, we got to be somewhere in 20 minutes. And like, it's just hard. It's hard to like, unless people are like super like have super chemistry, like it is hard sometimes to like get that same effect. You know what I mean?
I think definitely a lot of it comes down to how comfortable they are, because, you know, traditionally a lot of people haven't been in front of a professional camera. Like it's not something that a whole lot of people do. I think nowadays maybe it's more common, but it's not something that, you know, a lot of people are comfortable with. But that's also why I do the engagement shoot, is that, you know, I'm like right here with the camera in front of your face, and they have to be, you know, they have to think of me as invisible, which is easier said than done. Over my wedding career, I've kind of gravitated more towards the same-sex couples. And so a lot of people, like other photographers, will, you know, ask me stuff about them, and specifically how to pose them. And, you know, I see it in photography groups every week. Like, oh, I'm shooting my first same-sex photography. How should I pose them? What do I do? And I guess I would just say to people, like, they're just people. Like, don't be afraid of them. They're not any different to a male-female couple. Just don't gender your poses. Like, I don't really get why people do that. Like, if you want them to pose in a certain way, just say, hey, you guys go stand over there, and one of you stand in front of the other, and the one in the back, just wrap your arms around the one in the front. They'll go over there and they'll put themselves in that position. So you don't, like, say one of you, like, or Kyle stand in front and Brendan, you stand in the back. Well, most couples have, like, when you're taking a selfie, most couples, one will stand on the left and one will stand on the right. It's just these things that you fall into. So if you tell them to go over there and stand in a very specific way like that, that might not be how they're comfortable. Whereas if you just tell them broadly to do it, they'll make themselves comfortable. And that's just something I've kind of found, is that people are weirdly scared of same-sex couples, but they're just human beings. They just want you to like them as much as they like you. So don't be afraid of them.
No, but I actually think that that's a great point, because we don't do as many same-sex weddings as I would like. The worst thing for me, the first summer we ever did weddings, I did 4 just like the first summer, and 2 of the 4 were same-sex, and it was awesome. But like now, just like there's such terrible weddings, like in terms of like video quality, that I'm like, oh, we can't, whatever. Yeah. So it has been hard for me the last couple of years to like, really kind of ramp up that, because like I want, any kind of religion, any kind of sex. And, I want, when you look at like a portfolio, I want you to be able to see you somewhere on there, wherever it is. But I do remember that we had a wedding last summer, and I had referred the photographers too. And so we all like were very much on the same team. And yeah, it wasn't like a scary thing, but yeah, like I do remember like what you're saying there, where I'm like, well, how do we, like, what do you say? Right. And it wasn't like there's no uncomfortable, like we didn't care, but it was like, you're just so used to like, okay, have the woman put her head on, or like, you're just so used to that. Right. Like, and it's not even like an intentional thing. I think it's like a train. So I think that's a fascinating point. So do you get a lot of people asking you for advice on that?
I do. Yeah. And I find it weird. Like, I'm not any kind of like expert on this. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, and they said, well, you're more used to it. And I was like, am I? And then I kind of thought about it, and I guess for like because I'm in the LGBT community, I do kind of have that advantage of, I'm pretty forward thinking or whatever, but a lot of people don't have experience with same-sex couples, and they're not asking to be malicious. They're asking from a place of learning. And I'm like, as long as you're asking from a place of learning, just ask. Like, say to people, hey guys, like, I don't mean to be offensive, but how, like, how do you want me to, pose you? And one of the things I always do is at every session, or every couple session, is when we start, I always say, hey, can you guys tell me how you say your names, and can you tell me your pronouns? Because, I might get what I think is a same-sex couple, but it turns out that one of them is actually not the sex that I thought they were. So that way they can tell me what makes them comfortable, their pronouns that they want you to use, but also how they want you to say their name. Because I did a wedding with a lady called Alicia. I was calling her Alicia for the entire engagement session, and at the end she was like, can you just call me Allie, because only my mom calls me Alicia. I was like, oh, so that's awkward. So yeah, they'll basically tell you, just let them tell you what they want you to do. But yeah, never be afraid to ask, as long as you're coming from a point of learning, which most photographers would be. And then also I would say, if going back to your kind of portfolio thing, if you don't have same-sex couples won't go where they aren't represented. Like, when I was getting married, we contacted, like, I got married in Vancouver, but we contacted 10 photographers, I think. Only one of them replied to us. And now I know why that was, but we didn't expect that. So yeah, some photographers just won't shoot same-sex couples. And that's sad, wrong, whatever. But by putting on your website, same-sex couples, couples of color, you're advertising that you want them. And that's important. But if you don't have that, but you want it, then I would suggest going out and doing a model call. Like go out and, shoot them for free. Find those people so that you can find more people. But I would say only do it if you completely agree with them. Don't just do it to make the money, because that's not good.
Yeah, no, and it is interesting because like it was never even a thought for me, when we started, because like I worked in news, like I covered when gay marriage passed, and like I covered that for years, and like so it was not even like a thought for me. And like like when we would have couples like email me and be like, just so you know, like this is a same-sex wedding, like is that cool? And you're like, well, yeah, because like I just never even thought about it, right? Yeah. But like I think maybe especially like not in Seattle, it might be a little harder. Where I think Seattle is, a little bit more.
It is to a point. I've definitely seen some photographers it's more kind of out in the outlying areas who have said some pretty harsh things and definitely say that they don't shoot same-sex weddings. And I'm like, okay, it's more for me. You be you, boo-boo.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in today and taking time, like I said, on a long holiday weekend to come in and drive down and participate. Thank you so much for coming in. If people want to learn more about you and your projects and weddings and everything else you're working on, what would you have them check out?
So my Instagram and Facebook are at Jamie Buckley Photography. My male boudoir project is at No Bits But Butts, because Instagram doesn't allow, well, it's changed now. It used to allow butts, which is why I called it that, but they don't anymore because they change their stuff daily. And then, my website is just jamiebuckleyphotography.com or nobitsbutbutts.com. That one's a little sparse. It's mostly just kind of the photos that Instagram didn't like.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.